Hello everyone, I'm Zahid from Talks Innovation Valley, and today we have very amazing guest with us, Rian Ross. Let me introduce you a brief introduction of Rian. Rian Ross is the former founder and CEO of TopDog, a company that enabled video game players to compete for cash prizes. Currently, Rian works on the business development team at Mercury, a fintech company which offers banking services for startups of all sizes through their partner banks. So, we really warm welcome you to the show, Rian.
Thank you so much for having me, Zaid. I'm really excited to be here today and get to chat with you.
So, Ryan, before we jump to the questions list, I would love to know my audience about your entrepreneurial journey and personal story, from where you got your schooling, higher education, and how you started your professional journey and how all this went so far.
Yeah, absolutely. So I attended the University of Oregon up in Eugene, Oregon, had a really great experience there and got to connect and meet some awesome people that really inspired me to have this kind of entrepreneurial spirit and drive. Um, Recently, after graduating college, is where the idea of Top Dog, my former company that I founded, was born. And really explored and dove headfirst into that whole founder and startup experience there. It was really, enjoyable and something that I was able to learn so much from, helped me land where I am today with in my career with Mercury. And something that I wouldn't trade for, anything in the world there. So it was really nice to kind of be able to build from the blocks I laid, the foundation I laid while at the University of Oregon to ultimately starting Top Dog to landing here at Mercury.
All right. So, Rian, inspirational journey. Rian, what are some of the common challenges founders face in the early stage of scaling up?
Yeah, definitely. And this is something, I can speak to firsthand with my experience at Top Dog. Being an early stage founder, it's tricky. Being a founder at any stage is tricky. But in the early stages, something that, I remember quite frankly experiencing firsthand is building a team. And this goes much deeper than, your co founders. It's who you surround yourself with and who you're really trying to build the company with. So obviously, putting together the right team of co founders is quite important, but also your advisors, the people that you're going to turn to specialize in certain areas is definitely a challenge. Something that you want to be, quite careful when building and kind of putting together there, as it's going to be the people that you build a company with and you grow a company with. And it's important you're able to work together, collaborate, and ultimately create something special. Something else that I'd highlight is getting, serious traction going is obviously something that's a challenge and a big milestone to come across. Traction definitely looks different for different startups and different industries, and especially at different stages. So with Top Dog, what early stage traction definitely looked like for us was acquiring customers and ultimately getting those customers, to start paying for our services. It was something we initially offered our platform for free. So it was something we really wanted to focus on building out that initial customer base, having people that were just somewhat interested in using a platform that we offered and competing, playing video games for rewards. Ultimately, we converted those customers, a percentage of them, to paying customers, really started to build out some revenue streams there, which is an exciting milestone. So, that's something I'd kind of highlight there as kind of two key pieces. Something else I'd note is just kind of the idea of building out stacks, allocating budget. So let's say early days, maybe you get a $25,000 check from an angel investor, right? And you maybe need to outsource some development to help your internal team, but also want to build out a marketing budget. What's going to move the needle most? Where are you going to, put those dollars that's going to actually drive the business forward and help you reach those goals that you've set out? It's going to help you raise more money and ultimately build the business. In the early days, you don't have a ton of funds. You're not ultra well funded, and you don't have the luxury of being able to kind of dip your hand in every bucket that you'd ideally like to. So it's important to really kind of zero in, set strong goals, and then, allocate the budget appropriately. That's something that is definitely a challenge because you obviously want to grow fast. You want to achieve all your goals and accomplish them with ease. But with a limited budget, you have to prioritize. You have to think what's going to move the needle the most and ultimately spend the money there.
All right. So, Ryan, when it comes to scaling a startup, what are some of the common mistakes that startup founders usually make?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think, as someone who created a company that ultimately shut down, I can absolutely speak to one thing of it's a little bit of a cliche, but doing things that aren't scalable in the early days. As your business evolves and things change, your practices and your processes are going to evolve along with it. But how you get your first 100 customers is not going to necessarily be how you get your first 1,000 customers, and doing things to get those first 100 customers that are scrappy, that are innovative, that are creative. It's really something that I think a lot of founders, they want to act and kind of, acquire customers as if they had a huge budget or a big team. And it's okay to accept that in the early days of a startup, that might not be the case. And I think what separates founders who succeed at those early stage from those that don't are being able to be nimble, being able to understand kind of the circumstances that you're presented with and overcome and adapt them. Another challenge that I would definitely say that we faced in the early days, and to kind of overcome is, or when you're trying to kind of scale up the startup, is building out the team. I think it's very tough to bring on more people to help build out your vision, and you help along your journey. So when you bring on people to the team, it's important to bring people on that are fully bought into what you're trying to build and what you're trying to do. People that are so invested in the product. So maybe you bring on someone in marketing, but they also are going to wear so many hats and do so many different things. So really kind of bringing on people that are going to help in all assets of the business in the early days, something that's quite important, something that I think really helps startups scale up quickly.
All right. So, Ryan, team is everything. To be successful, we must have a perfect team. So, when it comes to the team, how startup founders could build a great team? What are the key qualities startup founders should see in the potential teams?
Yeah, this is definitely the golden question, right? As you noted, it is the most important thing. Building a strong team. It's what your investors are, partially going big part of what they're going to be investing in. And B, it's the people you're going to spend a lot of time with. You're going to be building a company with. So there's a few things I would note. Number one is you should go out and get people that complement your skill set, thus have a different skill set than you. So they don't have to be, opposite. You can both be technical co-founders, but it's important to have a well-rounded, diverse team that comes from some different backgrounds. I think that's something that's another thing, I've seen this happen myself. And I still, today work with founders where the team has a very similar skill set, thus they don't complement each other that well. Number two is have people that have skin in the game. It's a term that's used, pretty commonly by investors, advisors, people just kind of around the startup space. Something that, I think is very important is for all founders to be both emotionally, but also maybe financially invested in the business, so that when things get hard, there's not this kind of, not equalness across the team of who's invested, who isn't, and kind of being able to speak to the different assets and all that stuff. And then finally, I think it's okay to date your co-founders, to really spend some time, getting to know them and seeing if there is a fit. It's a huge decision to bring someone onto your team, to decide that you're going to join, the team together and build out a business. So it's important to, understand that there's a mesh. There's no need to rush into it. Talk through things. Maybe in the early days, talk about what's your vision. What does a roadmap look for you? Are you guys capable of working together? What does that kind of look like for you and them? What's your vision? How long do you want to be at the company? All of these kind of important thoughts and processes are really important to be on the same page about, because it's in the early days when you first kind of sign those papers and become co-founders, it's easy, it's very exciting, but things from there, it's a long journey. There's a lot of, challenges that are going to be faced, and you want to know you're with people that are going to be, by your side and be a true partner to you and, real co-founder throughout the journey.
What role does technology play in scaling a startup, and how can founders make sure they're leveraging the right tools and platforms?
Yeah, definitely. I think that one of the most important things and one of the coolest things, quite frankly, about being a founder is the community that you get to be ingrained in. A, the startup community, but B, the founder community. It's a special group of people. It's a very smart, intelligent group of people. And something that I would say is founders love to share wisdom and experiences with other founders. So leaning into that fact and really leaning on the founder community to build out your tech stack. And something that I would absolutely highlight is an early stage company is not going to have the same tech stack as a later stage company. And that's totally okay. But leaning into the community and understanding, hey, what did you use when you were a pre-seed company? Or, we have $50,000 in our bank account and we need, a project management solution and some sort of CRM. Having these types of tools in place and going out and kind of talking to people that have done it before, doing research is one of the most powerful and impactful ways you can put that tech stack together. On the kind of impact it has on the business, it's everything. Early days, it's important to do things, build processes that ultimately work and you can kind of re-implement into different areas of the business. Technology plays a huge role in this. Having the right tools that help you organize and accomplish your goals is a massive way that you as a founder can really drive, success in the business and initiate repeatable processes. Because that's what it's all about. If you can do things once, that's great. But ultimately, when you're building a business, you're going to have to rinse and repeat. And technology is a huge way in doing that. So to recap, I would say lean into your founder community, talk to people, see what they're doing, reach out and, understand maybe not what they're doing right now for a later stage company, but what were they using when they were at your stage? And then ultimately, lean into that technology, let it help you accomplish your goals. And ultimately, I think it'll take you a long way.
As a founder, how a founder and CEO can prioritize that what things he or she should take care of, what are the most important areas, and what should be the metrics and key performance indicators that he or she must be taking care of?
Yeah, that's definitely a great question there. And I think that as a founder, especially if you're serving in the role as CEO, you want to have your hand in so many different buckets. You want to at least be involved in almost every aspect of the business. And maybe there are certain people where that works for them. But the one, single most important thing I think that a CEO of an early stage startup needs to be able to do is delegate. Needs to be able to trust the people that they bring on board, that they're going to be able to accomplish their job and ultimately drive impact and success for the business. I think those are things that are so key and so commonly, it's your baby. You've created the startup, maybe from the ideation phase to the early days of an MVP. And, then you go out and raise a little money and you want to continue to have, your hand in every single project, every single bucket. So it's important to, lean on your team, let them drive success as well and guide them, check in. So I think one of the things that's most important for founders to do, especially in the early days, is talk to their team. When you delegate, you don't have to, be out of the know, be out of the loop when it comes to, what's going on in your business. It's ultimately, your company, your investors, your advisors, your customers are going to know what's going on. So if you delegate, a project to your COO, for example, have weekly check-ins that are scheduled with them where you're talking through the success metrics of the project, where things are, where things stand. So, are we behind or are we ahead? And if we are behind, step in. How can I help? What can I do to, make this easier? What can I do to get this back on track? Another thing I would say is in the early days as a CEO, you should talk to your customers. I think that's one of the biggest metrics that, you can really pay attention to, especially early on, is what's important to our customers. Sometimes you build something that you think is going to be so important to your customer base, is really going to, make this experience that much better for them. But it's not a feature that, is that meaningful or something like that. And the only way you can get this information is by actually going out and speaking to your customers, both the happy ones and the not so happy ones. It's a really good experience, something I think CEOs of the early stage startups should definitely spend a lot of time doing. Finally, I would say, understand that you need to have some top 3 objectives each quarter. Break it up. That's kind of how I operate on that mindset of each quarter. I'm going to have 3 objectives here. There's obviously sub objectives built into that, but you can stretch yourself thin and be spread, too thin to really accomplish anything meaningful for the business and actually drive impact. So if you have, 2, 3 objectives each quarter that you truly believe you're going to help the business level up, get you to that, place you want to get to, and have a plan to get there, execute. I think that's the best way to approach it. And, that holds you and your team accountable then.
Right. Ryan, until the startup founder is not good on hell and the work and life balance, things don't go well. So how startup founders could make create a work life balance?
Definitely. I remember in the days of Top Dog, finishing work and laying in bed late at night, and my mind would just be racing. All I could do was think about this business, new ideas or things I thought we could do differently, or people I thought we should bring on board, or a review from a customer. And I'd be laying in bed and I'd wake up and I'd immediately run to my notes app on my phone and I'd jot something down. And I was never able to, escape mentally from, this being a founder. And I think that's part of it is you're so passionate about what you're building. You're so invested emotionally, financially, and physically in what you're building, and everyone around you knows what you're doing too. So, it's important to own it and be proud of being a founder. It's quite an accomplishment just to start a company and be building something in the early days. But as you noted, Zaid, it's that work-life balance too that's going to enable you to keep going and not burn out and, ultimately be a valued member of your team. If you're constantly physically and emotionally exhausted, you're not as valuable. You're not an asset to your team like you are if you're rested, and get some time away from the business, get some time to disconnect. So some things I would do is go for a walk. That's okay. And, think about things, listen to a podcast that's not, work related, or even if it is, step away for a second. Something that, I thought was very impactful for me and really helped me with my journey being a first-time founder and an early-stage founder with TopDog was building out a strong advisory board. So, these were people that had industry expertise, domain expertise across a number of different areas. And I would really lean on them, A, when things got tough, but B, when I needed to disconnect, call them, ask them how they would disconnect. These are people who have been there before. And kind of what I noted earlier too about that founder community. Founders are here to help other founders. They really do want to help people succeed. So ask people what they did to, see success in this kind of area of having some sort of work-life balance. And then the last thing I kind of say on the subject is it is okay to have fun while being a founder. It truly is. It's, it is hard to disconnect. It really is. But take some time on a weekend to spend some time with your family. Go out to eat with some friends. Do these things that make your life normal. At least put the laptop down for a little bit. Go out and get some fresh air and then come back to it. Because I promise you it'll make you that much stronger and more effective at your job if you're refreshed, if you have a good mental balance going on, and you're able to come back and be, an asset to your team again.
Right. Ryan, until the business model is perfect or going good, a startup could not be successful. How a startup founder could know that his or her business model is working well or not working well?
Definitely. So I think this goes back to what I was saying earlier of having objectives. Have 3 objectives that are meaningful and impactful for the business, so that you can always kind of come back and be like, did we check this box? Did we accomplish this goal? If not, why did we not accomplish this goal? Is it because people don't actually want this product that I thought they did? Or is it because we need to, iterate on a process internally and do better at something? So that's, I think, first and foremost, when you have objectives that are clearly defined as a team, you can always come back and look at them and A, hold yourself accountable, but B, assess processes internally and ultimately drive impact from that. Number 2, and I think this is kind of the golden question for all startups, is at a point, are people willing to pay for this? Are you able to drive revenue from this business? And if the answer is no after a while, it might be time to reassess the model or rethink. And then kind of going back to what I said earlier about talking to customers, you can draw all the conclusions that you want internally, but truly the best thing that you can do is go out and talk to your customers. understand why are they willing to pay for this? Because that's great. If you have paying customers and people want your product that bad, they're willing to spend their hard-earned money on it. That's an amazing signal. Even if it's just 5 people, you can grow from that. You can repeat that process and you can understand what makes them want to pay for this product. But if people aren't willing to pay for your product, that's also okay. And you can learn a ton from that. You can iterate from that. You can understand maybe, you know what, the way we're building this isn't what our customers, our target customers, would actually want or enjoy. So I'd say those are some key things. And then finally, tying it back to those objectives, at a certain point, I think there's that moment of realization you might have to come to. We're not hitting these objectives, and really look internally, talk with your team, lean on the advisory board, understand why you're not hitting these objectives. Maybe you're setting the wrong objectives. Maybe you're shooting for the moon when you really need to hit the stars initially. But figure it out. It's okay to understand, okay, we missed this objective, and then take a look internally, talk with your team and see, is this because, maybe we're building something that isn't, wanted by the market, or there's not product market fit? Or can we change a process internally? Can we pivot slightly? Can we do something differently, to find that product market fit, to get to paying customers, and to find, that goal that, all startups are shooting for there.
Ryan, what are some of the strategies to create a culture of innovation and continuous improvement within your team? And keep in mind, that people hate innovation, people resist change. So, how to do that?
Definitely. And I think this goes back to, first of all, this idea of bring on people that want to be a part of your startup, that want to be here and want to play many roles, especially in the early days. So you might have a defined position, and that's totally great. And that's honestly good to have, clear-cut expectations and roles in the early stages, but understand you're going to wear many different hats. And something that I think is really important is have people that deeply care about your product. That really harnesses this idea of innovation, of culture. Spend time building, and connecting with your team. As I noted, I think part of going back to that work-life balance question is spend time with your team outside of work. Really get to know them, because what that does is ultimately create stronger bonds, a bigger, connection across the team and departments for when you do come back to work and it's time to, think about how are we going to achieve this goal? We're having this problem. You know what? I need to have a tough conversation with my coworker. There's deeper connections there. There's levels of, real relationships that you're building. Another thing that I would say too is set one-on-ones with everyone on your team. And as CEO, I think this is one of the best things that you can do is connect individually with the members of your company. Give them the floor to tell you what they think is going well and what's not going so well. Ask them what ideas they have. So you're hiring people, you're bringing people on your team that you think are a good fit, that you think are smart, and that are going to add value to your company. Lean into that. They might have the idea that really kind of pushes the startup, the company, to that next level and really kind of drives that innovative, creative culture that you're ultimately trying to build. I think it's easy as a CEO to want to maintain a ton of control and keep decision-making and a lot of the big ideas at a high level, the top level. But it's important to lean into the people that you bring on board and let them, feel free to share ideas, feel free to share feedback. And ultimately, when you get that feedback and it's something that, is worthwhile, explore it, create a plan, and ultimately build it.
All right. So, Ryan, what are some of the key legal and regulatory considerations that startups need to keep in mind when scaling, and how can they ensure that they are staying compliant?
Yeah, definitely. I think this is a really good question. And, I wouldn't say that I'm a legal expert here. So one thing I would say is it's a good practice to, get in touch with a law firm or some sort of incorporation service early on so that you can ensure you're doing business, above board, you're legal, all that stuff. And ultimately, similar to that advisory board concept, lean on them. Let them kind of guide you through what you need to do to be, compliant with the laws and regulations. Same thing goes for like an accountant come tax season. But similar to kind of what I was saying earlier about, an early stage company's needs doesn't need to look the exact same or won't look the exact same, quite frankly, as a later stage company. You don't need to go fancy or above and beyond. What you need to do is do things that work for you and your company within the budget and the stage that you're at. So go get that attorney, that legal advisor that can really help you. With TopDog, it was one of the biggest challenges that we faced being in the industry that we were of skill-based gambling. There's so much regulation. There's so much, legal tape around everything. The lawyer expenses were quite, significant and something that we had to, pay a lot of attention to and operate very carefully in. But that might look, differently for a traditional SaaS startup where they're not, in a highly regulated industry where all you really need to do is ensure that you're incorporated, you're paying your taxes and all that good stuff. So, like I said, not a legal industry expert there, but definitely I would say make sure you have a good foundation of, someone you can turn to in these areas and that, you can ensure you're being compliant for those reasons there.
All right. And Ryan, how could one balance the need for speed and agility with the need for careful planning and strategic decision making?
Yeah. And, I think speed definitely is everything. It's really important with startups, but at the same time, it's being intentional. So it goes back, I think a lot of the times of having a game plan, having an understanding of what do you need to accomplish in the short term and the long term. A product roadmap is a really great place to start. So I think there's this idea of you have a plan and it's going to happen exactly, like you imagine it, like you want it to there. The reality is with a startup, scrap the vision and kind of you're going to have to get creative and, iterate a lot and kind of come in and do things that you probably didn't expect or you didn't foresee. And that's part of being a founder. That's part of building an early stage startup there. So most important thing I would say is have a plan, have, core objectives that you want to hit and have a product roadmap. So, okay, this is what we're doing every day. This is what we're building towards this week, this month. And then being a founder, being an early stage startup, things will come up where you need to scrap that plan completely and urgently allocate resources towards doing something else completely. I think as a CEO, it's important to always assess internally with, other top team members, as well as the advisory board of what is going to drive the most impact, because it's really common where there are multiple things that you might want to focus on or you feel are very important. But you don't have a big enough team. You might not have the budget to accomplish everything that you want to in the short term. So what's going to move the needle the most? What's going to, help the business achieve milestones that put you in a better place to succeed? And then ultimately doing things with speed is so important. With a startup, it's quite common and I think quite frequent to understand you're going to have competitors that are also building and iterating, or just the idea that you have, exciting traction and customers and they're craving this product that you're building, this business that you're building, and you want to get it out there to them. So building fast, but also being intentional with that. I think something that's also really important with all of this is take your time to review things before you put it out. It's really, sometimes easy to write a newsletter, without proofreading it or whatever that might be. You're sending an investor newsletter. Take your time to review things before it goes public. And, I think that a balance of speed with objectives will lead you down a path of success and ultimately set you up to have that balance of, all right, I know what we need to accomplish. I know something else is going to come into the mix that almost becomes more important. Where does that fit into our roadmap? And how can I ultimately, drive the team, lead the team to accomplish these goals?
Ryan, how a startup founder could build and maintain good and strong relationship with the investors and also with the other stakeholders when he or she especially is scaling up the startup.
Yeah, this is something that is so important. I think your investors, your stakeholders, they care about you and they care about your company. And it's very important to maintain strong relationships. A, they're there to help you. And B, it's just a good business practice. Something that we did at TopDog was we sent out a monthly newsletter that was very transparent. So I think there's sometimes this inclination in the early days of a startup to only share the good news. You don't want to scare people off by sharing the bad, But in reality, it's important to also share the struggles, share the bad news. I remember when runway started to get short for us, we included that in a newsletter. And we actually were able to secure some follow-on investment from existing investors from sharing that in a simple newsletter where people were like, you know what, we didn't know this was the case. And had we not been upfront and shared that with our investors, we wouldn't have been able to, have that additional runway to keep building the business and keep growing there. So I think a newsletter is a great way to communicate. Another thing that I would say is prioritize, blocking time each month, each week to touch base over the phone with these people. Go grab a cup of coffee. It's really important to, again, lean on their expertise. They're in the position they are in because they were either once in your shoes or they've worked with people in a similar stage, in a similar space. So lean into that expertise and, seek out that communication with them because it's really important and it builds trust too. As you scale up and raise more rounds or bring on more investors to the cap table or have more stakeholders in the company, it's important to have a foundation of trust with those that have been there from the earliest days. That is ultimately, how you create a process that's repeatable, that you feel like you can go out and raise from, bigger institutional investors and they're going to be able to trust you and you're going to be able to trust them. So I would say one, like I said, a newsletter is a great way to do this. And B, talk to people, schedule those one-on-ones, schedule those weekly or monthly check-ins where you can tell people the good news, but also don't be scared to share the bad news or not even the bad news, the things you're struggling in, the areas you need help in. Because that community, that team that you built out is a lot deeper than just your co-founders. It is your investors. It is the stakeholders, and they are sometimes the people that can help you guide you through those tough situations. And, you can really lean into when you need that assistance.
Ryan, do you think that scaling sometime also causes failure of the startup or collapse of the startup? Let me give you an example. Maybe you don't know the name of the startup, but in my country, there was a startup named Airlift. They raised 110 million dollars, but still they collapsed. Especially, they collapsed when they were scaling. So, do you think scaling also caused the collapse of a startup because they scale a lot without need?
Absolutely. I think that there might be this common misconception, as you mentioned, that startup there raised $110 million. Investment doesn't necessarily equal success. It gives you some of the key resources you need to drive success. But as a founder, as a CEO, it's really up to you at the end of the day to understand what the business needs at different stages. So as you said, Zaid, exactly, as you're scaling up and the needs are going to evolve so quickly. So that idea of speed doesn't just come on the good. It also comes during the times of things are going to change rapidly. If you, quickly go from that, 10,000 to 50,000, 100,000 customers, your company is going to look a lot different. And what you need to do to drive success is also going to look a lot different. So absolutely, as you're scaling up, as the business grows, there can be pitfalls within that. And that's where it's important to have objectives, constantly lean into those objectives, check back into them. And then, like I said, when you're doing things that aren't scalable in the early days, you are reach a point where all your systems need to be scalable. And you have to kind of slowly transition out of this early stage startup with a very scrappy, loose mentality to a very formal, well built out processes, well built out systems. Because you could fall into the pitfall of growing almost too fast, where you're not ready for the growth, and then you run into some serious issues as a founder, as a CEO, where you're not able to lead the company. And I think having objectives that you can turn to and kind of feel confident in at any stage, and B, having that roadmap where we know kind of what the next week, month, 6 months, and even year look like for the company, even beyond that, is very important and helps you kind of navigate through those times there.
All right. Ryan, last question, not actually the question. What one message, what one advice you would like to give my audience? Any inspiring message. My audience is actually university students, startup founders, and potential entrepreneurs, educators, and business community.
Absolutely, Zaid. I would say if you are thinking of starting a startup, building a startup, do it. It is scary. There's a lot to it, and there's a lot of unknown. That's okay. I was a first time founder. It was the most incredible experience of my life. I would not trade it for anything. All that I've learned, and to be honest, and this is first time saying this in like a public forum, we failed. We did not succeed. We did raise some capital, we did have customers, but we ultimately failed and had to shut the business down. And looking back on what I learned from that experience, the people I met, the community that I was able to create, and even what we were able to build in that time that TopDog was around was truly special. So if you have that entrepreneurial itch, you want to go out and start a startup, I absolutely would say do it. Find the right people to do it with. Don't rush into becoming co-founders. Lean on advisors. If you're at a university, there are going to be professors. There might be an entrepreneurial club that you can join and kind of get the resources that you need. I think there's a lot of accelerators out there. It's good sometimes if you can get into an accelerator, join that. It's good to have that expertise. We were a part of an accelerator that was a really nice experience for us, and really kind of helped us through a lot of navigate things in the early days, build out that advisory board again, and just kind of have people, surround yourselves with people that have done it before. But I think my one piece of advice, my one ask of the audience is, if you have that itch, you have something you want to build, you have a business you want to explore, do it. And I think the worst thing that happens is you fail, and that's part of being a founder, a startup, is you learn, you grow. And I could not be more grateful now to be at Mercury after TopDog. It's been a great experience, still getting to work with founders every day, and talk to startups at all different stages. So it's been an amazing journey, and I'm so grateful where it landed me.
And uh, trust me, it was really insightful. Thank you for joining.
Thank you for having me, Zaid.
Uh,